The ignorant man who reads the title of this book and thinks to himself, oh, so this is like about jobs and like how we should live responsibly and, you know, work hard, yeah? That guy, oh, he's in for hell. What follows are my initial thoughts and reactions to this book of the Bible. I have not done any outside research regarding the more challenging or problematic passages of Christian scripture. Therefore, do not take whatever criticisms I may make in this video as my final word on the passage or verse in question. I am very likely going to be doing a Bible Revisited series addressing my different issues with the Bible, book by book, after conducting ample outside research. So now, without further ado, let's jump into the review. Job is a book in the Old Testament of the Bible, and it is believed to have been written either by Job or possibly Moses, Solomon, or Elihu. And it is a book that is centered around, though, the character of Job, who was a righteous man, great in just about every way, and who then goes through hell. And the book is essentially answering, or I don't know if it answers, but it certainly addresses the question of why the righteous suffer. Why do bad things happen to good people? That's what Job is primarily all about. There's a whole bunch of other things that are addressed within the story of Job, but that is the central question. And boy, oh boy, this book is, it's heavy. I'm just gonna, before I do have a bunch of passages and, things I'd like to go over with you, certain verses in the book of Job. But before I do that, I just gotta say, like, this book is a challenging book on a number of levels. Because on the one hand, I think there's a lot of truth in Job, a lot of things that just make sense. Like, Job completely obliterates the whole idea of the prosperity gospel. And if you are not familiar with what the prosperity gospel is, look at Joel Osteen or any of these other TV preachers who basically say, hey, if you live a righteous life, you're gonna get rich. Yeah, Job is like, no, if you live a righteous life, you might end up rich, but you also might end up living through the most intense suffering ever. The book addresses the fact that, sometimes friends who are well learned in religious subjects, are terrible at applying these religious truths to real world situations, because all of Job's friends, they say many true things in their speeches to Job, but many of the true things that they say about God and about righteousness and all those things, according to scripture, many of those truths don't apply to Job in the situation, and so they end up being just like the worst friends who add to the hell that Job is already living in. So while I hold all of that stuff in this hand and say, yeah, there's a lot to get out of Job, and there's more things to get out of Job than even just what I went over, that are true and that are good and that are right, while I maintain that there's much to be learned from Job, on the other hand, Job is a book where, I would accept everything and actually think Job is one of the greatest books of the Bible, and most informative books of the Bible. I would think all of that if there was not one crucial incident at the very beginning of the book, and that is when basically God and Satan worked together to ruin Job's life, which kind of seems to be a massive contradiction to the nature of God and what he does. Because it's not like God just allows bad things to happen to Job. It's not that he just allows Satan to do things to Job. No. What happens is God calls all these angels to him, and Satan happens to go with them, and God is like, hey, Satan, what you been doing? And Satan's like, well, I've been moving back and forth on the land, and, and then the crucial thing for me is God literally suggests to Satan. He says, have you looked at my servant Job? He's holy and blameless and terrific and all these good things. And Satan's like, well, that's because you've put a hedge of protection around him his whole life. I bet if, he's tampered with and goes through hell, he'll curse your name. And then God's just like, well, hey, have at it. Ruin his life. As long as you don't kill him, just destroy everything that is valuable to him. And my problem is that, I mean, God selected Job out for Satan to do these horrible things. And I get it, people are like, Job was selected for testing, but I'm like, maybe it's a misconception of mine, but God and Satan aren't supposed to work together. And God basically made it like it was almost like a game to him. Job's life was like, he was basically just like, see Job over there? Satan, try and ruin him. I bet you can't. That's kind of what it felt like. What I take issue with is it's almost like God directs evil in Job's direction without cause. That seems contradictory to God's nature, is my big issue. It seems very strange. I mean, it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. And if that conversation at the beginning of Job hadn't happened, like where the reader isn't even aware that this conversation with God and Satan happened, let's just say that most of that first chapter just wasn't even in the book of Job. It just started with Job living a happy life, and then suffering and affliction happened, and then God comes in at the end as, let's just say that Job is exactly as it is, but without that first section. Then I would be totally like praising the book of Job and being like, oh, this is just so, the moral is so clear. Bad things happen to both good and bad people, but regardless of, where you stand in that, just trust in God and have faith in God. And because God works all things together for good for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purposes. Live with integrity and just persevere and all this stuff. I would be totally all for it. But with now knowing the explanation for why these bad things happen to Job, knowing that, it makes the whole book kind of like, wait, what? I have not looked into, other people's explanations for Job, and, maybe there is a way to look at Job that makes sense and that, isn't so problematic. But as of right now, I mean, it really seemed like God was collaborating with the devil to just inflict pain and suffering on an innocent man. It seems like an experiment on a good man for the sake of just seeing what happens. Anyways, though, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into the analysis and discussion portion of this Bible book review, and let's go over the different verses and passages that I found particularly worth discussing. So the first passage I would like to go over with all of you is Job chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. Job is like a great role model. He's so strong, and like he just constantly perseveres and is like, it's just incredibly impressive. Job's his sons and daughters are just destroyed. His cat, everything that he owns, with the exception of his wife, is just taken from him. His whole life is hell. Right after this happens, this is Job's response, and I found it just like, whoa. It just made me go, whoa, this is a different kind of human. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. That was his reaction to his whole life, even his sons and his daughters being taken from him. Instead of cursing God, I'm going to give thanks to God, basically, and accept things as they are. That's a spiritual strength that is incredibly foreign to me. And I find it incredibly admirable, though. The next passage I would like to discuss is Job chapter 2, verses 7 through 10. Now, this passage is after basically Job passed the first test. He did not denounce God in any way, and God has another kind of conversation with Satan, and God's like, see, Job was strong, even though, you did all these horrible things to him. And what's another thing that's problematic to me is this is in verse 3. At a certain point, God says, and he still maintains his integrity, as in Job, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. And to me, I'm just like, what?
So the book literally says that, like, Job is punished for no reason. I mean, anyways, to the passage that I was initially talking about. So basically, God says you failed, Satan, and Satan's like, skin for skin. As soon as I am allowed to destroy his body, he'll denounce you. And God's like, okay, well, have at his body, just don't take his life. And so what happens is in verse 7, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Job is just like, he's totally accepting of what is out of his control. I mean, in many ways, he's a stoic. I mean, he's just putting his faith and hope in God with the belief that God is working everything, together for good in his favor. And, that line, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? It's like, whoa. See, my question is, would Job feel the same way if he knew that God had basically put Satan up to this? Because like I said, God didn't just allow trouble to come Job's way. He kind of directed it toward Job. But Job never finds out the reason, and so, I have no answers. Now skipping ahead to Job chapter 13, verses 4 through 12, we are in the middle of the negotiation, the conversation between Job and his friends. Job's friends are saying many true things about the nature of God and about, what Job is going through, but incorrectly applying them to Job. They are just basically convinced that Job is guilty and that they know the proper diagnosis for what Job ought to do in this situation, a situation that they don't even understand at all. And Job is he's had it. And he's just like, man, you guys suck. You could just comfort me, but instead you insult me and accuse me without evidence and all of this stuff. And Job goes on a little bit of a rant. I think there's something to be learned from it, particularly about just, your role in trying to correct people and your role in trying to counsel someone who is in the midst of suffering. I think this passage is quite informative, and it's certainly hella powerful. Verse 4, and this is Job speaking. "You, however, smear me with lies. You are worthless physicians, all of you. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. Hear now my argument. Listen to the plea of my lips. Will you speak wickedly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Will you show him partiality? Will you argue the case for God? Would it turn out well if he examined you? Could you deceive him as you might deceive men? He would surely rebuke you if you secretly showed partiality. Would not his splendor terrify you? Would not the dread of him fall on you? Your maxims are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay." Beautiful writing. But the point here that Job so accurately makes is it's not our job to think that we know what God is doing. And Job's friends all act like they know the mind of God. They all act like what they're saying is totally in accordance with God. They all act like they are divinely informed when they're not. And Job's like, hey, what do you think God's going to think of how you are using his name to condemn me when you don't have evidence to condemn me with? Maybe shut up. And if you don't shut up, beware, because you may, come Judgment Day, have a shock coming your way as to which gate you go through. And along with that, in chapter 19, verses 23 to 29, Job is again ranting at his friends, and he's just like, we'll start at verse 21, and he makes a brutal indictment of them. And I'm just going to read it because the passage kind of speaks for itself. And again, it's a warning to all of us who are removed from this specific situation. It's a warning Don't be like Job's friends. It's like, whew. Verse 21. Have pity on me, my friends, have pity, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock for forever. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him, with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. If you say, how we will hound him, since the root of the trouble lies in him, you should fear the sword yourselves, for wrath will bring punishment by the sword, and then you will know that there is judgment. Again, Job is like, hey, you judging me, and you taking the place of God by judging me, that's not going to be fun for you when judgment comes your way. And again, like the strength of Job, like in the midst of his like horrific suffering. I mean, like the suffering throughout this book, I mean, it does not let up. For almost to the very end, it does not let up. And yet Job still finds the strength to say things like, how my heart yearns within me, basically to see God. Even though God is allowing all this stuff to happen to him and kind of directed it to happen to him. I mean, it's like, Job, what a strong-willed guy. Moving on to Job chapter 21, verses 17 through 21. This passage presents both a very thought-provoking idea and also a kind of problematic, contradictory statement with regard to the rest of the Bible. And so it's definitely worth discussing. To give you some context, Job is in the midst of a rant, ranting in front of God, in front of his friends, and just kind of about his whole situation. But, this whole book, Job's friends have been basically saying karma's real. If you are wicked, you will have wicked come your way. If you are good, you will have good come your way. And Job stops them, and in this passage, he goes, wait a minute. Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them, the fate God allots in his anger? How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by a gale? It is said, God stores up a man's punishment for his sons. Let him repay the man himself, so that he will know it. Let his own eyes see his destruction. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about the family he leaves behind when his allotted months come to an end? Basically, Job is saying, wait a minute, often the wicked don't suffer punishment in this life. Often they get away with it. They live long, happy, prosperous lives. And, maybe bad comes to their children, but why doesn't it come to them? Why doesn't it, why should it come to them and not to the man who did all the evil and wicked? And because obviously when the guy's dead, he's not going to know what happens to his children. And so Job is very rightly going, wait a minute, guys, your whole idea of karma, you do this and you get that in return, that's just not true. And so, he very rightly points that out. However, he says something in here, verse 19, that is in conflict with the rest of the Bible. And I do recognize that it's Job saying this and not God. But it's still nevertheless quite problematic. And that verse that is problematic is when Job says, it is said God stores up a man's punishment for his sons. That is in direct contradiction to the rest of the Bible, where it says a man is to be punished for his own sins. Children are not to be punished for the sins of their own fathers. That's a repeated phrase throughout the Old Testament. And yet, when you look at the Old Testament, repeatedly it seems as if God does punish children for the sins of their fathers. And Job is basically saying that God, in fact, does do that. And so I am confused. The whole punishment of children for their sins of their fathers or their ancestors, that whole idea it goes back and forth in the Old Testament. On one instant, it's like, no, everyone's punished for their own sin, but then God punishes someone's family for the sin of one member. and then Job says this. If someone can explain to me how that's not a massive contradiction, if someone can explain to me, why God killed all the firstborn of the Egyptians when the firstborn, many of them were just little babies that didn't do anything wrong. Like, if someone can explain to me how that is not punishing children for the sins of their fathers, if someone can explain to me how that's not in conflict, then, you're a genius and you're amazing. But I've never heard anyone explain it. Skipping ahead to Job chapter 28, verses 12 through 28. This is my favorite passage in the entirety of the book of Job. But where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? Man does not comprehend its worth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. The deep says, "It is not in me." The sea says, "It is not with me." It cannot be bought with the finest gold, nor can its price be weighed in silver. It cannot be bought with the gold of Ophir, with precious onyx or sapphires. Neither gold nor crystal can compare with it, nor can it be had for jewels of gold. Coral and jasper are not worthy of mention. The price of wisdom is beyond rubies. The topaz of Cush cannot compare with it. It cannot be bought with pure gold. Where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds of the air. Destruction and death say, "Only a rumor of it has reached our ears." God understands the way to it, and he alone knows where it dwells. For he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and measured out the waters, when he made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm, then he looked at wisdom and appraised it. He confirmed it and tested it. And he said to man, "The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding." See, I agree with that. It's just beautiful. And, I have, obviously, if you watched any of this review, I obviously have some difficulties with the Bible. But the pursuit of God and shunning evil, I agree. That is the way to wisdom and understanding. By reading the Bible and other religious books like the Quran and others, I hope to finally know what is true wisdom and what is true understanding. I think I'm getting there. And I still consider myself a Christian at the time of filming this video, but I am very conflicted. Hopefully I will come to the point where I just, I find the truth. Now, the only other passage in the book of Job that I would really like to discuss it's not really a passage, it's the entire chapter of Job 41. Well, really 40 and 41. Where God describes to Job what first sounds like a crocodile, but then sounds like a dragon. If you read particularly verses 12 through 32, or 12 through 34, the description of Leviathan, it sounds like God is describing a dragon. Now, maybe he's not, but man, that's what it sounds like. It talks about warming the coals with its breath and all. It's like, it sounds like a dragon. That's all I'm gonna say. That's what I'm putting out there. Not saying that it is. It's just, it got me thinking, are dragons in the Bible? Maybe. So in the end, ladies and gentlemen, Job is, it's a book I'm gonna have to come back to and read and reread and, really get to the bottom of it, because it's a very important book. It's talking about very weighty issues, and after just reading it this time, I certainly don't understand everything. And so, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to review it over and over and over again, for me personally. But I will say, at the end of Job, God does restore Job's life to prosperity again. Job, survives all the trials and tribulations, and whether he had died through them or not, moral of the story is God will reward him at some point anyways for his goodness, whether in this life or the next. And that all is very beautiful and nice, but I can't help but think, like, at the same time, Job probably still misses his first family and all the people that he had loved before. I don't know, it's just like, ugh. This book really is it's a tug of war situation in my soul. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you have read the book of Job, and I surely hope that you've read the book of Job and not just watched this video thinking that you can learn all there is to know about the book of Job from watching this video, so if you haven't read it, go read it now. To all the people that have read the book of Job, please leave any comments or questions you might have in the comment section of this video, and I will take a look at them. Let's get a good discussion going, and let's find the truth within the pages that is the book of Job. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe. Tell your friends about the channel. And never forget to